We're going to look at Agile leadership. We're actually going to look across the last 2.5 million years of leadership. So in 40 minutes, that's going to be fun. But first of all, I want to start by looking at chimpanzees and the strategies that they use to become the alpha male in the group. So the first strategy that they use is dominance. The biggest animal, the strongest, that can beat any of the others. This is actually the most common strategy that's used. In 2011 in Tanzania, in one of the groups which is actually watched by researchers, a chimpanzee who they called Pinu actually had used this approach. He had been leader of this group for around 2 years, and he beat up on anyone who showed any form of resistance to his leadership. He had just finished beating his second in command when 4 of the others ganged together and beat on him and actually killed him. So 4 of the much weaker ones, and actually, on average, dominance works for about 2 years. That's the average for chimpanzees. We then have the next one, so there are 3, so this is number 2, and that's intelligence. So there are some chimpanzees who actually think about, what can I do? So for example, there are tools. So certain chimpanzees have become leaders of their group because they understand tools and they're introducing new ways to the group. The particular example I want to talk about was also in Tanzania, although it was 1964, which is before even I was born, which is quite something. And a chimpanzee called Mike. And what he did, he was actually the weakest chimpanzee in the group, physically the smallest. And he was beaten on by the others all the time. He was the lowest ranking chimpanzee in the group. And what he did was he actually stole into the researchers' camp, and he stole 2 kerosene bottles, empty ones luckily, and he ran at the other males with these kerosene bottles in front of him, making lots of noise and looking very scary and strange. And they all ran from him. And using this tool and technique, the alpha male of the time actually did give in to him and gave up his rule to this particular chimp. So smallest one, but actually used his intelligence to make himself scarier. The third and final technique is actually around politically building alliances. So we have the story here of Labutu, who was alpha male in a zoo, in Taronga Zoo. And he became alpha male by default. It wasn't something he chose. The alpha male died. There was no other adult male at that point in the troop. He therefore became the alpha male. But what he did was, in a very unusual move, he actually groomed the females of the troop. He groomed not just the high-ranking females, but also the low-ranking females in the group. Highly unusual for an alpha male to do this. Not only did he do that, but he played with the young in the troop. He let them steal his food. He became part of their team and who they were. He was actually challenged many times for leadership of the group by bigger, healthier, more muscular males. And what happened, so there was one particular example where Chimbunka was the name of the chimp, the biggest male that he'd ever been challenged by, challenged him, and 17 of the females immediately jumped on him and stopped him from attacking. And on average, males who use this political alliance type approach last 10 years rather than 2. We also have some chimps who actually don't want to be leader of the group. And we often forget about that. So this is Jomio. He's actually the biggest male in his troop by far, but absolutely never is aggressive to anybody, and is one of the lowest ranking chimpanzees in his group because he just doesn't want it. The best results, though, for chimps that last the absolute longest are those that combine and change their approaches. So perhaps a chimp uses dominance to get to that alpha male status and then changes to political alliance afterwards. Or they actually treat individuals differently, and with some of them they'll use a dominance approach, and with others they'll use a political alliance, and with others they'll show their intelligence. Those are the ones that actually last the absolute longest as leaders. So chimps generally have a troop size of about 50, that's normal. But their close-knit, often family but not always, is around 7. So that's where they feel comfortable. They've got the close group of 7 and their wider group of around 50. Studies have shown that humans are actually very similar. Again, close groups of around 7, but larger groups, a bit bigger now, of around 150 of that contact that happens quite a lot. It's quite interesting, actually, this 7 number. I don't know where Scrum got its 7 plus or minus 2 as its number for a team, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was from studies such as this. So where can we learn from the chimpanzees? Why am I telling you any of this? There's a few reasons. One is, so there's an example of Craig Scoogie. He was president and MD for Symantec, actually across the Pacific. And Symantec had a structure such as this. So they had lots of situations where there was one person managed by one person who was managed by one person. And in fact, some people were managed by 2 people. There weren't very often any groups that had more than one person in them. And he rearranged it so that it was teams of 7 in divisions of around 150. So just split everything up to work that way. And quite interestingly, so a net promoter score goes from minus 100 to plus 100. It's often used around marketing. But they measured their employee satisfaction using a net promoter score. And it went from minus 38 before he did this reorganization to plus 71.5, which is a huge jump. And Symantec worldwide's average is plus 5. So it made a huge difference to the happiness of people and the engagement of people in that organization. So nearly all management theory that we hear and that we talk about is from the last 250 years since the Industrial Revolution. We have all sorts of theories, we'll talk about a few of them later, but they're all from that period in time. If we look back across the last 13,000 years, we can see how small the 250 years that all of our management theory comes from is on the edge there. So the last 13,000 years is since we invented agriculture and since we started to settle down. So very different in that period. And if we take the 2.5 million years before that, you can see how small the 13,000 is on the side here. Then it was very different again. And actually, I would argue that a lot of what makes leaders good is actually the types of things that we were looking at for leadership during that 2.5 million years when we evolved, rather than the last 13,000 or definitely the last 250. So there's a theory called the Savannah Principle, which is based around this 2.5 million years. And it's talking about things not to do with leadership, but it's talking about things like, why do we like fatty, salty, sugary foods? Well, we like them because during this 2.5 million years, liking them meant that we were healthier and we lived longer. Nowadays, it probably means the opposite, but at that point, that's what it meant, and that's why we like those things. So I would like to consider whether also questions around leadership from that time are also important. So we need to look at leadership. At that point, we were semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers, and studies with current hunter-gatherer groups have shown that they actually have a really fluid leadership structure. So if E.T. landed and said, "Take me to your leader," they actually wouldn't even understand the question. The followers choose the leader for a particular activity. So you're going to go hunting, Well, you choose someone you think actually is going to make your hunt the most successful hunt that it can be. You're going to go and try and gather medicinal herbs. There are probably people who really know how to do that well and where to find things, and you're going to have them as a leader at that point. So not only is the leadership fluid, but also there's a lot of correcting mechanisms. There's a lot of ways in which the group can actually bring down somebody who's getting above their station and thinks that they're the leader of the group. Lots and lots of ways of doing that. Obviously, murder is ideally not too often. I'll stop moving and I'll just stand like this. So let's move now to the last 13,000 years and consider what happened then. We had agriculture. We settled down for the first time. For the first time in human history, we actually had surplus. We had huge population growth. And with that came chiefs and kings and warlords, came authoritarian and power leadership, came the ability of one person to decide how resources would be distributed. And with that came elite. So if you consider a king and how they're running their kingdom, they can't know everything that they need to know. So they have a group of people who advise them. And each one of those needs a group of people who can advise them, so on through. And that's where hierarchy originally came from, was the fact that we had this one person who was trying to manage so many people that they needed those advisors all the route down. So we then get to the last 250 years. Lots and lots of different management theories. I'm not even going to start to go through them. But they're all based near enough on that hierarchical approach from the 13,000 years before, whilst completely ignoring the 2.5 million years that happened before that. So what differences do we have to that 2.5 million years of human evolution? Well, for one thing, managers are imposed on people. The people in an organization don't choose who their manager is. The higher-ups do, and they are imposed on people. We don't have a fluid leadership structure. That person's there, they're staying there until they leave the organization or get promoted or whatever, but you have no choice as to who your leader will be. There is no fluidity there. Sometimes the manager is also not an expert in that area. They may just be somebody who's really good at management. Or they are somebody who used to really do the job really well, but haven't done it for 5 or 10 years because they've been in management. So they don't actually know the pain that people go through today. We also had even wealth distribution during that 2.5 million years, near enough. Whereas now, the latest figures I saw is that the CEOs in the US earn 185 times the lowest salary in that organization. We're in a really, really different world than we were. We also can't do that correction that I was talking about. So the gossip, the criticism, the disobedience, they are not very acceptable in today's workplace. We might do them a bit, but they're not acceptable. They're not correcting mechanisms in the same way. Leaving the group, obviously you can do that. You can leave your organization, and then you're walking into another organization. So you don't necessarily know whether that's going to be better or worse. We tend to discourage murder today. So what problems does this lead to? We have a lot of silos. We have a lot of people with their own kingdoms. Internal rivalry rather than working together to try and solve problems. We have 60 to 70% of employees who say the most stressful thing about their jobs is dealing with their direct line manager. We have unnecessary leadership. We have people coming in trying to manage people who don't need that managing, who actually know more about it than perhaps the person who's trying to do it. And this leads to situations where change is difficult because it's often being imposed. It's often resisted because it's often being imposed. So all sorts of issues. And this is because what we're trying to do here is manage and not lead. I when I very, very first became a team leader, I completely failed in this management leadership thing. So I was a team leader. I'd worked in that team. I knew the other people in that team. We'd worked together very well. I was asked to do the team leading as well as carrying on doing the development, which I did. And there were 3 of us in the team. It wasn't a very big team. One of the others thought the same way I did, was motivated by the same things I was. That was fine. I was able to talk to him, deal with him, get him to do the sorts of bits that we need to have done. We'd agree on the approach. It was easy. The other guy just wouldn't do what we were talking about doing. He just wouldn't. He wouldn't complete the work. He wouldn't do it in the same way. He wouldn't do it to high quality. He just resisted all the time. And I spent a lot of time wondering what was wrong with him and why he just couldn't see that we had to do things in a high quality way. We then had something, this was a really long time ago, I'm really old, okay, so this was before you could easily get bug tracking systems for free, well before. So we had a very exciting mechanism of, I think it was an Excel spreadsheet, and we needed something that would create a unique number for us for various reasons. We couldn't just use the bit. So I asked him to do that. So it was just a really quick little tool that would just generate a unique number for us. And so he wrote that tool, and he came up with Mabel. So Mabel, it just had a picture of an old lady called Mabel. And we had to ask her really nicely if we wanted a number. We had to use polite words. We had to type in and request a number from her. And if we typed anything that didn't contain enough polite words, or maybe contained some rude words, she wouldn't give it to us. And she wouldn't give it to us for about the next 3 times that we asked until we'd been polite enough. Then she would give us the number. And it became a real central part of our team, a real part of our culture of our team. We would joke about, well, what would Mabel think about that design approach, you know? And we would, it became a really important thing. And I understood for the first time that actually he just wanted to work in a different way than me. He had something really different to bring to the team than I had to bring to the team. I would have written a really boring tool that just did its job. And after that, whenever there were little things, silly tools, those sorts of things to do, I always made sure he got those to do, because he loved those. And then he was quite happy to get on with the main bulk of the work as well. And we came to this place where we worked together far better, because I was no longer trying to manage him. I was actually trying to understand him and what he wanted and what motivated him. So the important thing here is that leadership is so much more important than management. I don't think in the IT industry that most people need management. I really don't believe that. We, however, do have some hangovers from our 2.5 million year history. Who do we have as leaders? Who do we choose? Political leaders, where we have choices. Who do we have as leaders? Looks actually are incredibly important when you start looking at these things. 30% of Fortune 500 companies, their CEOs are 6'2" or over. There's something in height that tells us that this person is a good leader when we're recruiting, when we're looking. People can tell high-ranking CEOs from low-ranking CEOs just by looking at their faces. The squareness of the jaw, apparently, is what it's in. We also have children. When they're shown photographs of political candidates that people are voting for, they nearly all the time choose the winning candidate, the same candidate that the electorate choose just from looking at their faces. And we have prototypes of leaders that change at different points in time. So, for example, the type of leader we would choose in war is probably tall, is probably male, is somebody who's not afraid to take risks, is an authoritarian type person. Whereas in peacetime, far more social skills and softer facial features. So there was an experiment that was done. It was done on British people. 600 British people were asked to take this test. And it was all Americans that were in the test, so they deliberately chose people that wouldn't be known to the general UK public. And they had to choose which one had certain jobs. And they were military generals, they were CEOs, state governors, and American football coaches. And they had to choose which one. And when asked afterwards how confident they were in the choices they'd made, they were all really low confidence. They're like, yeah, you can't tell that. But the vast majority of them, absolutely every time, chose the right face. They knew which face went with that job. So there's something in the way that we choose people, something in the way that we assess people's abilities just by looking at them. Servant leadership. So this is all about being a servant first and a leader second. It's not about the pay you get in that job. It's not about having the authority, being seen as the bigwig. It's not what it's about. That absolutely is secondary and probably not important at all. What matters is the team. What matters is that you are serving the team. And the types of questions that are on here are the things that tell you, are you being a servant leader? Do those served grow as people? Are they becoming healthier? This isn't just about what they do at work. Wiser, more autonomous in what they're doing. Are you growing them into being leaders if that's something that they're wanting to do? Are you looking at how to serve them rather than how to serve yourself? I think we've got to talk a little bit here about corporate cultures because obviously the ability to lead in different ways is hugely affected by the culture that you're in. So Handy has 4 categorizations of culture. The first one of those is the power culture. This is like a spider in the middle of its web. There's one person in the organization who absolutely knows the strategy, the tactics, why everything's happening. But they're the only person in the organization who know that. They're sitting at the center of the web. Everybody else just works on one strand of that web. They don't really know where their strand fits into the strategy. They don't know why they're working on that strand. They just know what they're being asked to do. An organization like this can come from small one-man bands that grow. It can come from that route. And what tends to happen is really high staff turnover. So the people on those strands, they're not bought into this organisation. They don't understand why what they're doing is important. And that actually just emphasises to the person in the middle how important it is that they don't bother sharing it with anyone else because they all leave. So it's self-fulfilling and it tends to continue. Trying to introduce servant leadership into an organisation like that is probably doomed to failure. Any sort of leadership is probably doomed. The second category he has is the person category. So in this type of organisation, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your job role is. It doesn't matter what your salary is. What matters is, are you the right person to solve this problem? So something comes up, can you actually solve this problem? And you will go and solve that. I worked in an organisation with this type of culture for about 8 years. And it was great fun for me because there were some situations where I needed answers from human resources on things. And they didn't really know. And I was able to say, well, shall I just do that and look at that and solve that? And they're like, yeah. Which was great for me, not because I particularly want to go and do HR things, although I don't mind, but because the problem got solved and I cared that the problem got solved. We then have the third one, which is task culture, which is probably more akin to what we do in the Agile world. But this is across the whole of the organisation. So this is, we have a problem, we form a team to look at that problem, to work together, to try and solve the issue that we have right now. They will be together whilst that problem's being solved, and once we're in a place where it's solved, that team will actually break up and they will form into different teams to solve different problems. The final one is the role culture. So in this, the pillar represents, say, a department. The people at the bottom of that department are the ones that have nobody reporting into them. The people at the top, maybe the heads of department, they have all of the power in the department. If they say something, it goes. It doesn't really matter if it makes sense or it doesn't. And what matters about you most is your role. What is your job title? What band does that mean you're at? Because somebody in another pillar is going to listen to somebody at a higher band in the first pillar rather than somebody at the bottom band in the first pillar. So really, really structural. All communications go up the pillar, across the top, down the next pillar. And all communications coming in from anywhere else come down the pillar through the management chain. The organisation I work for currently has this type of culture. It's a 140 years old financial institution. And it's really interesting because we're working through trying to bring in cultural change into the organisation right now. But this is still its default culture as I speak. Actually getting people at the bottom of the pillar to talk to other people at the bottom of the pillar for another department has actually given huge benefits to the organisation that they seem really surprised by. But this is just makes sense. You know, the people trying to do the work are talking to the people trying to do the work. There is also, within my current organisation, there is one particular manager who's one rung above me, but not in my department, he's in a different department. But if I'm in a meeting with him, he will often try to use his seniority to force his opinion. He has a certain tone of voice that he likes to use. You guys might have heard that particular tone. It effectively means, I'm more senior than you are, I have authority here, you should give in to me. It's the dominance type approach if we're thinking about the chimpanzees. Not that I often think about chimpanzees when I look at him or anything. But I like to play the I don't understand the tone game. And I just pretend that I'm really thick and I just don't get that that's what he's trying to tell me. And he can't cope with that because he doesn't have a way of explicitly saying, you should give in to me because I'm more senior than you are. And that means we can actually have a conversation and we end up in a place that makes sense. It might be his place, but we've ended up to that through communication rather than through dominance. So I also have, from my current organisation, a different problem. And that's that the people who report to me have people who report to them. And they put rank on me. They put hierarchy on me. They won't just chat to me in the way that they might to other people because I'm a certain way up the management chain. And that's really weird for me. And we're breaking that down and it's changing hugely. But I guess I hadn't realised how much it's not necessarily my choice about whether people are empowered or feel comfortable to come and talk to me. I can't actually make that change if they are putting that hierarchy on me. If they won't talk to me because they haven't yet spoken to their team lead, and as a matter of respect, they should talk to them first. That's actually a problem in trying to get things done quickly. And we are changing that culture. And we're actually quite a long way down that now. But that was really hard to deal with. So the importance here, if we look at the 2.5 million year history, it wasn't about the leaders. All we've talked about when we've talked about the Industrial Revolution period and we've talked about the agriculture period is the leaders. All we talked about when we were talking about the 2.5 million year history was the followers, or the workers in today's parlance. And I think we need to get back to that emphasis on the workers, not on the leaders. Why do we always talk about leadership qualities, what people need to do as leaders, instead of what do the people who are working want from their leaders and actually what's important to them? So the Towers-Watson 2014 Global Workforce Survey covered 32,000 workers across the world, over 31 countries, over 1,600 organisations. And it asked them lots and lots of questions. So one of the things that they were looking at was engagement. So they had disengaged, around a quarter of people completely disengaged. They had that 17% of people felt supported, but still didn't feel very engaged with the company. They had around 20% felt engaged, but didn't feel very supported, and 40% were highly engaged. So why do we care? I mean, we should care because these are human beings. But if you're talking to someone who's not very people-oriented, why should they actually care about this engagement level? Well, many studies have shown individuals who are highly engaged perform better, they're more motivated, and it actually is shown to be represented in the financial results of organisations with very highly motivated and engaged staff. It increases return on investment, it increases innovation, and all of those financial measures around growth of income for companies is higher where the people are highly engaged. So that same survey looked at people and said, okay, so what is making you motivated or not motivated? Let's have a look at how effective you think your immediate line manager is. And let's also have a look at how effective you think your high-level managers in your organisation are. And what it showed was, 8% of people were highly engaged in organisations where they said, neither my line manager nor my high-level manager are effective. If one or other was effective, then that jumped up quite a lot. But if both were effective, then 72% of employees were highly engaged in that organisation. That matters. So then the survey also looked at and asked the workers, what do you look for in an effective line manager? What is it you actually want? And this is a chance for the managers of today to actually understand that the followers are the most important thing, and giving them what they need will give you what you need as a manager. So the first thing on here is respect. Absolutely, totally and utterly central. Clearly communicating what they need from members of the team. Open and honest. Helps remove impediments and positively manages poor performance. This is probably the only one on there that perhaps isn't quite in line with the way that we think of Agile. We obviously want to manage performance. We talk about team performance. We talk about all those things. But what workers are telling us is they want us, where there are poor performance issues, to address those. And as managers, it's actually really hard to do. If you ask people what the hardest things are for a manager, they'll come up with sacking someone as the first thing. And the second thing is managing poor performance. We don't like to do it as human beings. We don't like to give negative feedback. It's uncomfortable. And if we do it, we tend to do it with emotion and anger rather than actually constructively. But this is what people are telling us they want from their line managers. So what do they want from their very high-level managers? Again, respect, the first thing that comes up on the list. Inspiring. They want to know that they're going to make rational decisions for the long-term good of the company, not just having maybe an operations director who also runs IT that's never worked in IT and doesn't understand that this particular decision in a year's time is going to have to be replaced with another one. Communicates a clear and compelling vision, that compelling being the most important thing, and is flexible in their approach. So it's all about understanding that the most important people in all of these things are the team, are the workers, are the people who are doing the do on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones who actually achieve things. The leaders are actually there just to enable them to do it. That is the job of the leader. And it's all about the team, and it's all about us. And it's never about me and what I've achieved and how I have communicated with these people and got them to do what I want to do. There's also a question here about changing leadership style, back to that chimp approach. So There was a study of 55 businesses which was looking at the most successful businesses and the leaders within those businesses. And what it found was that people who stuck with one leadership style, so they were always servant leadership people, let's say, they always stuck with that one style, might be successful, but they wouldn't be as successful as those people who changed their style depending on what stage of the project they were at. Were they trying to form a team to start, or were they a long way through and that team just ran on its own? Then they can do a different form of leadership, maybe more relationship biased. Or who understood that people are not fungible. You can't just pick up one C# developer and replace them with another C# developer. People are different. People have different motivations. They have different reasons for being there. And if you don't change your leadership style for that person, then also you won't be as successful. So effectively, what I'm trying to say is we're just like chimps. And that's everything that I have for you. If it moves on. So, are there any questions?
Yeah, those two photos of the military general.
One of them was a military general. I don't know which
right.
one actually was.
Which one?
Let's move back.
I think we've got to take take a vote because we all know.
I'm going to go back.
Yeah, go back. Let's take a vote.
I like that question. I've had a guess because I don't actually know the answer.
Yeah, but I think
that
the majority is going to be right.
Let me just escape out and go back. It's just thinking about it. It's Windows, there we go.
Right, so who says left? And who
Oops,
says right?
That's not helpful.
Well, we still don't know.
I would say left. That's the one that I guessed on. I don't think they actually had serial killers in their... but he might have been an American football coach. Maybe there's a similarity.
So who of you knows the online test where you have to decide if some person is a programmer or a serial killer? Google it, that's fun.
I'll have to put that one in next time, definitely.
Okay, any other questions?
We've been hearing recently more and more about host leadership. Not servant leadership anymore, but hosting leadership. Any thoughts about this?
At the end of the day, I think it doesn't really matter. I mean, servant leadership is just there as a way of kind of saying, you might want to think about this as an approach. I think what matters is that we think about the workers and what is actually enabling people to do their job better. I'm a development manager. I haven't coded, well, at least not at work, they don't let me anymore, for like 5 years. The guys who are sitting there, who are coding day to day, they know what gets in their way. They know how to do their job better. I don't know how they can do their job better. They need to tell me. And that's what matters. Everybody just has a different role. And my role is to try and make their lives as easy as I possibly can so that they can just get on with their work. And whatever sort of leadership style we call that, whether it's about trying to build the team, whether it's totally about doing what's needed at that point for that group of people and taking yourself out of the equation and just looking at them. Any other questions? Nope. Lovely, thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more Linzer Torte for you.
I'm going to have to eat lots of Linzer Torte, aren't I? Thank you.